If a person destroys another person's property, they break the law. But what if a person watches a live stream and in the comment section says, "Blow the mosque up with the adults in it"? Does that deserve prosecution?
An offence of publishing written material intending to stir up racial hatred.
The woman who sent this post was jailed for 15 months, and she is not the only one. The UK doesn't publish exact figures on how many people are arrested for things they say online, but anyone can send a Freedom of Information request. That's what the Times did. And they found that in 2017, the number of arrests rose to over 3,300, or 9 people per day. But this figure is likely higher because the request for data was rejected by 13 out of 45 police forces.
The sentence is one of 2 years imprisonment.
20 months imprisonment.
But is this used to censor certain opinions?
It is a strength of our society that it is both diverse and inclusive.
This is free speech in Britain with hindsight.
I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online.
In the direct aftermath of the riots in 2024, Keir Starmer, now just a month in office, introduced rapid sentencing to act as a deterrent to further unrest.
Will face the full force of the law.
But the riots kept spreading, and it was widely recognized that false claims and online hate contributed to the unrest. The government published the now infamous "Think before you post" tweet, reminding people that content that incites violence or hatred can be illegal. The following day, Jordan Parlour and Tyler Kay became the first to be convicted for things they said online, receiving sentences of 20 months and 38 months in prison. But many more would follow. I will later get into what these men exactly posted to be sent to jail. But first, to understand why these recent developments are so significant, a bit of historical context. In the 18th century, the theatre was a form of mass communication, and the Crown realized its potential danger. They commissioned the Lord Chamberlain's office to censor plays. Everything that he deemed offensive or dangerous could be banned. Later, with the advent of cinema, the film industry established the British Board of Film Censors to prevent government intervention. This organization still exists today, and amongst other things, can apply age restrictions to films. Censorship throughout the centuries was used to limit the expression of certain opinions, with the goal to maintain public order. In the 1920s, a perceived threat was the spread of revolutionary politics to prevent the emergence of a communist Red Britain. In the 1950s, the perceived threat came from within. Society was now divided between those seeking to preserve conservative values and those seeking to loosen norms around particularly gender roles and sexuality. Censorship targeted opinions that could challenge social and political stability and targeted those who controlled forms of mass communication like film, radio, TV, or journalism. Britain made great strides towards more freedom of expression in the 1960s. Stage censorship was ended and other restrictions were relaxed. But certain opinions were still seen as harmful, like those relating to the Troubles in Northern Ireland. What makes today's situation so different is that everyone can broadcast their ideas to a large audience. People have been sent to jail for sharing posts in Facebook groups that have just a few thousand followers. Others posted something, they were shocked by how much it was shared, and subsequently deleted their account before still being sentenced to serve time in prison.
This was grossly offensive, racist language and behaviour.
Before we get to specific cases, a quick word from my sponsor. Freedom of speech is something that you are born with, and so is your personal information. That's why we have laws that give you the right to go to any organization and ask them to delete all the data that they have on your name. But it would take ages to do so yourself. My sponsor, Incogni, is a service that goes out on your behalf to take data off lists that data brokers are using to send you spam, to call you with offers, and this can get nasty really fast. I signed up less than a month ago, and my data has already been removed from 36 lists, and 14 are currently in progress. You can see exactly where your data is deleted and which brokers have a bad reputation. Go to incogni.com/hindsight and apply the code hindsight at checkout to get a 60% discount on a yearly plan. Thank you again, Incogni, for sponsoring this video and for supporting my channel. Now, let's go back to the UK. Censorship has always existed in Britain, and the type of content that is censored depends on what is happening in society. Today, society is increasingly divided on topics of immigration and religion, and central themes are anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. The number of incidents targeting Jews is seeing an upward trend, with spikes that coincide with geopolitical events. And similarly, there are worrying trends with the number of anti-Islam incidents. When people are arrested for things they say online, it's typically with the broader intention of maintaining public order.
I'm arresting you on suspicion of improper use of the electronic communications network.
What?
127.
This video was published during the peak of the summer riots and was seen over 50 million times. The officer cites the Communications Act from 2003, where under section 127 it says, "A person is guilty of an offense if he sends a message that is grossly offensive or of an indecent, obscene or menacing character." This law dates to a time when Facebook and Twitter didn't exist and social media was in its infancy. The issue first rose to the public's attention in 2012.
There's been a real degree of common sense and compassion.
The UK was praying for a soccer player to survive. After suffering a cardiac arrest during a game, a 21-year-old student took to Twitter and said, "LOL, Mamba, he's dead." After receiving criticism for his comments, he responded with racist slurs. He was arrested and sentenced to 56 days in prison. A few weeks later, a 5-year-old girl went missing.
It's been 36 hours since April was taken from us.
It was a tragic story that touched the hearts of many Brits. But a 19-year-old took to Facebook and said, "Who in their right mind would abduct a ginger child?" He went on and continued posting offensive comments, some more sexually explicit in nature. He was arrested and sentenced to 12 weeks in prison. But the case that really started the debate followed a month later. At Robin Hood Airport in South Yorkshire, bad weather led to many flights being cancelled, and amongst the unlucky travellers was a 26-year-old who was hoping to fly to Northern Ireland to see his girlfriend. He had returned home, and frustrated, he took to Twitter. "Crap, Robin Hood Airport is closed. You've got a week and a bit to get your shit together, otherwise I am blowing the airport sky high." A week later, this tweet was seen by an off-duty manager at the airport and he contacted the police. The young man was arrested and the story caught the attention of the media.
Paul Chambers arrived at Britain's High Court, flanked by two of the country's best known, most loved television personalities. Did he have any hope his conviction would be overturned? "I've learned not to second-guess anything," he said.
It became known as the Twitter joke trial. Charges against him were eventually dropped, but the debate was on. These cases made abundantly clear that the law on prosecuting online speech still needed work. The Director of Public Prosecutions promised to issue guidelines on social media cases. That DPP was Keir Starmer.
Principles of free speech and free expression require there to be a high threshold and dictate that a prosecution is unlikely to be in the public interest.
The legal cornerstone of policing the internet is an act that dates to 2003. It's commonly invoked in cases involving online harassment, trolling, or abuse, but a series of high-profile events in 2012 led to widespread calls for reform. This reform was led by several conservative governments who in 2022 presented the Online Safety Bill. This is where the term legal but harmful was first introduced, which was controversial from the start.
Who gets to decide what is harmful? Who gets to decide what is deliberately offensive?
It will mean that you can spend up to 2 years in jail if you're guilty of sending a communication which causes someone psychological harm, described as extreme distress.
The bill addressed real issues, and its focus lay on children and their online safety.
It is in the name of safety that our liberties are constantly being eroded.
Additionally, it forced social media companies to identify and remove harmful content. If found in breach, they could be fined up to 10% of their global turnover.
We won't be able to see things like terrorism on X, formerly Twitter, which has been such a key part of this recent conflict. We've been able to see the reality of Hamas, for example.
There was so much pushback on these laws, fearing that it would suppress legitimate debate on sensitive topics, that they were eventually dropped. In 2024, the legal and political debate was still ongoing, and we were about to get a live demonstration of policing the internet. The summer riots were terrible.
You will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online.
Keir Starmer was now PM. The riots followed a mass stabbing targeting children in Southport. Rumors spread online about the attacker being an immigrant who had arrived the previous year on a small boat.
We've seen Muslim communities targeted. Attacks on mosques.
The unrest spread to other cities.
Attacks on the police.
And misinformation online contributed to violence on the streets. Starmer was trying to get the unrest under control. On the official government Twitter account, they said, "Think before you post." Content that incites violence or hatred can be illegal. And the timing was no coincidence. The following day, Jordan Parlour and Tyler Kay became the first people to be convicted for things they said on social media, receiving sentences of 20 months and 38 months in prison. The internet went wild.
So I'm actually being
You're
arrested?
going to be arrested. This is in relation to some comments that you've made on a Facebook page.
This video went viral.
But I'm going to be arrested for posting on Facebook.
The caption read, "After 3 young girls were brutally murdered, speech is the crime that police focus on." This arrest, in reality, happened a month earlier, but the people didn't seem to care. The riots were spreading and intensifying.
You used the social media platform, then known as Twitter, to publish the following: "Mass deportation now. While you're at it, take the treacherous government and politicians with them."
Starmer widely publicized these rapid sentences to act as a deterrent.
31 months imprisonment.
2 years imprisonment.
Critics called this government overreach and authoritarian, and argued that this undermines civil liberties like free speech in the name of public safety. But a survey conducted during these riots also showed that most people believed that social media companies were not strongly regulated enough, and that they didn't do enough to counter misinformation. In some cases, the incitement to violence was easier to spot, like with Tyler Kay. He was sent to jail for sharing these tweets. This was during the first days of the unrest. One of the tweets that the judge mentioned was this screenshot, making reference to the fire emojis. In other cases, the incitement to violence was less apparent. Lee Dunn was arrested for sharing images of foreign-looking men with the caption, "Coming to a town near you." To my knowledge, the sentencing remarks aren't available online, but on this official statement, it says he reposted 3 images, which risked worsening community tensions. He was sentenced to 8 weeks in prison. In the aftermath of the riots, the sentences turned into a broader discussion on how to balance the prevention of misinformation and hate speech with concerns over freedom of expression.
What we've seen over the last week is the new Labour government, only a month old, respond to the riots and protests by essentially saying, "This is all far-right thuggery. There's nothing to see here apart from criminality and people breaking the law."
I know a lot of people were shocked by the censorious authoritarian turn the government took in the summer in the wake of those despicable race riots, where we saw the Director of Public Prosecutions taking to the airwaves to say that even retweeting something hateful could land you in prison.
Noam Chomsky said, "If you're in favor of free speech, then you're in favor of freedom of speech precisely for the views you despise."
You can never ever guarantee that what you say is 100% true. Now, Starmer, by cracking down on that, poses, I think, the biggest threat to free speech we've seen in our history.
If you create a culture of fear around speaking about certain topics, people will resort to self-censorship. We can already see this at British universities, where over 2/3 of academics decide to self-censor out of fear of how their opinion could affect their career, but also amongst the people. A recent poll showed that 76% of Brits have restricted their personal views out of fear of being harassed. Our opinion of right and wrong changes constantly. The consensus used to be that nudity in films was indecent, and it took until the 1960s before homosexuality began to be decriminalized.
Let me end the video with some food for thought. In the book 1984, one of the 4 ministries is the Ministry of Truth. Their responsibility was to rewrite history and to alter the facts to align with the ever-changing narrative of the ruling party. Their aim was to limit any free thought and to suppress any ideas that go against the established ideology. Now, ask yourself the question, what does that sound like to you?
It takes just a second to click on that subscribe button, and in case you're already subscribed, here are 2 videos you can consider for your next watch.